Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the future of the water and wastewater industry and the careers you didn't know about. And we are live in the studio with a special guest, colleague for many years, ladies and gentlemen, who is the executive director of CWWA, aka the Connecticut Water Association, Miss Betsy Gara. Hi, Betsy.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me today. It's great to be here on behalf of the Connecticut Waterworks Association.
Thank you very much. Well, as you know, as the impetus of the whole podcast is we all are getting older in this industry, and we're all getting up there, and the looming retirements are basically going to be very detrimental to our industry. So that in mind, tell us how you got into the water industry. And I know you handle a lot of the legislative end of things, and you're actually a lobbyist for a couple of organizations. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, my role has really been primarily as a lobbyist and a manager of the association.
Mm-hmm.
I did not intend to go into the water industry, but I was very interested in history and politics, and really began to get interested in shaping public policies affecting various organizations, businesses, etc. So after I worked my way through law school, I was hired by the Connecticut Business and Industry Association as one of their lobbyists, and lobbied on a wide range of business issues, including labor and employment, workforce development, transportation, and human resources issues. And as a result of that, I really fell in love with, the public policy arena, being at the state capitol, understanding the number of laws that affect a business. When I left CBIA and started my own lobbying firm, I was approached by the Connecticut Waterworks Association. And that CWWA is a trade association of municipal, private, and regional water utilities. And they were formed primarily to address all of the state legislation and regulations that are pending that may affect the water industry.
Yeah.
And so they hired me, which was good news for me. But it really gave me an appreciation for the water industry. I have to say the people that I meet as part of this are very committed to protecting the public health and safety of the residents. They're also committed to meeting the state's environmental goals and being a steward of the state's water resources. And so it's been a real learning process for me. I've been this executive director now for
quite a few years.
More than 20 years, I believe. And I have to say, it's a credit to the people that work in this industry that they are, again, so committed and have such expertise that we really have some of the best water quality in the country.
Sure.
And it is helpful that they understand that the state legislature, the state agencies can adopt a lot of different laws that may affect not only the quality of the water,
Sure,
but also the whole distribution system, the cost of providing water, issues like water conservation, drought management, workforce development, are all things that we as an association try to deal with at the state capitol.
Sure. And I think, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to get across as far as, potential students that are getting out of high school or getting out of college, that the arena or the umbrella that encompasses careers within this industry is a very large one, and you coming on basically is basically shedding the light on a different aspect as far as not operations but a lot of the lobbying aspects of it, as far as making people aware of a lot of the regulatory situations that we as water utilities have to put up, and a lot of those regulations impacts a lot of water utilities, and some it can impact it negatively. And obviously that's why we have you to keep and look out for our interests.
Well, it is important to have a presence at the state capitol because, as you mentioned, there are a number of laws that are considered every day at the state capitol that may impact water treatment, distribution, et cetera. And so you need somebody to be there to monitor what's happening on a daily basis. But I also rely on the expertise of our member utilities to review legislation, provide input on what the real world impacts may be if they adopt something. And these can involve very complicated issues such as sampling requirements, treatment requirements, and you really need the expertise to be able to communicate with legislators as to how a particular bill may impact
Right.
the water quality and water distribution. So it's been a real learning curve for me, but I have to say that I've developed a tremendous appreciation over the years for the people that work in the industry. And as you mentioned, we are now facing a significant number of retirements in the industry,
Yes.
as are other businesses. One of our big issues this session, and what we'll also be looking at on the regulatory side, is looking at some of those workforce development issues, trying to encourage more people to explore opportunities in the water industry and to see whether or not there's some opportunities that would be a good fit for them. And there's all kinds of positions in the water industry that will need filling. So if you're interested in working outside, there are positions in water resources management, addressing invasive species, watershed inspection.
Yeah.
If you're interested in working with your hands, there's positions in as water system operators, as you know. And also there's a lot of internal positions, accounting, government relations, human resources, operations, engineering. It's really a wide open field in terms of career opportunities for individuals.
Sure. Now, rolling back the calendar just a few years, and obviously, when you were forging your career path and so forth, how did your career path, did you have any idea, okay, when you got out of high school or got into college, what career path that you wanted to take?
I did actually, and I'm probably one of the few that did. I remember in high school, I was very interested in politics.
Uh-huh.
I grew up in the time of the Watergate era.
Yeah.
And so politics was front and center on the TV every day. And so I was interested in journalism because that was something that the Watergate era definitely inspired in a lot of people. But I was also interested in just the public policy aspect of it. And so one of my teachers in high school had said, if you're interested in politics, my best advice to you is to volunteer for a candidate. And he recommended a congressional candidate. He said, you're probably better off working with an incumbent because they're have the likelihood that they're going to win.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I went and I volunteered, and they gave me a lot of things to do. So I was coordinating volunteers in the area. We were leading bumper sticker brigades and telephone banks
Wow.
and things of that nature, coordinating fundraising events, marching and parades. So it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. And so when I got to college, I majored in political science. And as part of that, I interned up at the state capitol.
Okay.
Again, fell in love with it.
Okay.
But at that time, there really weren't any full-time opportunities at the state capitol.
Uh-huh.
It's a part-time legislature. The building closed at the end of the session. And so I was looking for something more permanent and decided to go to law school.
Okay.
And so I did that and ended up, again, being retained by the Connecticut Business and Industry Association. I do have to say, though, because a lot of people that are interested in pursuing a legal career end up majoring in poli-sci or something similar. But I would recommend that if you want to pursue a law degree, you're better off taking undergraduate courses in a different field, something that may be of interest to you, such as the sciences, technology, et cetera, because so many of those industries are highly regulated. They need attorneys to represent them before state agencies and regulatory processes on the state and federal court levels. And yet, if you don't have that understanding of some of the scientific principles involved, it's sometimes difficult to wrap your arms around. I've been fortunate. I've had some very good educators in the water industry that have showed me the ropes over the years and provided me with information on how to approach certain issues that are very complex.
Yes.
And I think, to my credit, I have never been shy about saying, I don't understand what you're saying. Please let me explain it to me in terms that a layperson would understand. And that helps me communicate with
Sure.
legislators that may not have the background that others do in terms of understanding some of the complex water issues.
Sure. And I remember when you first came on with CWWA, and you were very forthright in saying just that. A lot of these issues that you don't understand and so forth. And look at you now. I mean, you are so fluent in, a lot of the one of the biggest things today too that is being affected or that affects us in the water industry is the environmental side of things. Okay, you've got a lot of the environmentalists. You've got invasive species out there. You've got PFAS. You've got PFOS. So all of these things are impacting us, and dealing with them on a legislative level. And a lot of times you're communicating with legislators that have even less knowledge of what the issues are. So I think you're an excellent communicator as far as being able to relate to them the issues that face us as water utilities.
Well, thank you. And I think it was very refreshing when I came on board to find that we work shoulder to shoulder with many of the environmental organizations on a wide range of issues. As you mentioned, we are stewards of the state's water resources. We focus a lot on protecting the sources of water supplies, and to do that, you need to be pro-environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes we have to strike a balance, but in large part, we share the same goals as the environmental organizations, and I think that has helped us position ourselves at the state capitol on issues affecting water resources.
Sure. Now, the session, did it just start, or?
Session kicks off on January 4th
Okay.
For a long session. One of the challenges that we're going to have as an industry is that we have a number of new legislators, almost 40 new legislators that have just been elected. On top of that, we have legislators that are returning for their second term that we haven't had a chance to meet because the building, the legislative office building,
Sure.
state capitol, have been closed because of COVID. And so it's difficult to build those relationships. So we will be reaching out to our municipal, regional, and private water utilities and asking them to make sure that they communicate with their legislators, their legislative delegations, and just let them know that they're there, they're a resource in your area. If they have a customer issue that comes up, that they know to call you, but also to start developing those relationships so that when we reach out on a bill that may have a difficult impact on the water industry, they know who we are.
Sure.
And they trust what we're communicating to them.
And again, from the lobbyist standpoint, as the Connecticut Water Association is basically a compilation of large utilities, small utilities, municipal utilities, investor-owned utilities, and just to give people background, you have the larger investor-owned and the larger quasi-publics and so forth that have resources in-house that take care of their lobbying. But us here in Portland, we're a small municipal system, basically with about 2,300 customers. So we rely on our membership with CWWA and you, to represent our interests that we don't have in-house, staff or personnel that can address those issues.
Right, and that's what we're there for. The legislature considers hundreds of bills each session, and many of those may impact the water industry. So we make sure that we're there every day at the state capitol. We're monitoring the committee meetings. We're monitoring the public hearings. The legislative process, as I know you know, is sometimes very complex. Sometimes it's been likened to the sausage factory.
Yes,
And
it's in there.
So it's not enough to just be able to say, okay, here's House Bill number 5,200 and be able to follow it through the process online. It can go through a lot of different iterations. It can be amended in committee. It can be substituted for a different language in committee. It could then be referred to another committee, amended, et cetera, et cetera. So it's important to have somebody there, an association, a lobbyist that's there really every day watching how the legislation flows through this session and making sure that they are in a position to communicate with legislators if there are problems
Sure.
along the line. And so that's where we come in. And but again, we rely on our members to reach out. So it may be that something is amended and we're not clear on how that is going to affect a particular municipal or regional or private utility, but so we need that kind of feedback. And fortunately, CWWA is very well positioned to do that. So my members know that during the session, I may be emailing them at all hours of the day and night, and that they need to get back to me as soon as possible.
Sure.
Because there's not a lot of time. There's generally a bill is raised. It may be scheduled for a public hearing within 5 days. And so you have to develop your testimony and make sure that you have people positioned to testify and that you're all communicating on the same issues in the same manner. And then you have to be able to, again, follow up with legislators regarding the potential impacts. So there's a lot of moving parts, and it is something that, fortunately, we're the eyes and ears of the water industry
Sure.
up at the Capitol. And working together, we've been very successful in making sure that the legislation ensures that we can continue to provide high-quality water to residents and businesses at a reasonable cost.
Sure. Now, the legislative process is a very articulate process, and just take us through that a little bit. I mean, you have basically a short session and a long session. Okay, obviously this year is going to be the long session. So I mean, and obviously we have 169 towns in Connecticut.
We have 169 municipalities. There are 187 legislators, so there's 36 in the state senators that represent larger areas, and then there are 151 House legislators. There are a number of different committees. So the water industry pays particular attention to the Public Health Committee, which has cognizance over a wide range of public health issues, including water. We also focus a lot on the Environment Committee, which includes issues affecting water resources, invasive species, and things of that nature. In addition, there's a Planning and Development Committee that can have cognizance over a wide range of issues affecting local and regional planning decisions. We also focus on the Appropriations Committee, which that is the committee that develops the state budget and makes recommendations regarding budget authorizations. And in addition, you have the Finance Committee, which develops the bond package. So a lot of the funding available for water infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure, is determined by the bond package through either the Clean Water Act or some other funding mechanisms, or the Clean Water Fund.
Sure. And now the bills that are raised, I mean, obviously you can't bring a bill in, okay, 3/4 of the way through the session. Everything has to go through the process of being brought to committee, okay, being voted on. Is that
not quite as clean as that? It would be nice if that's how it worked. But generally, the committees raise bills within their cognizance. CWWA issues requests to the public or the various committee chairs and ranking members and asks for their support in proposing legislation. But there are times when a bill just comes out of left field and you weren't anticipating it.
Where does this come from?
And you kind of have to scramble to be able to respond to that. So again, that's why we're there watching everything all the time, making sure that, if something does come out, that we're prepared to respond to it. Connecticut also has what they call these budget implementer bills. And so a lot of times bills may die in committee. They don't go forward, but you can't just relax at that point.
Yes.
Sometimes if there's enough support, they end up getting folded into an
Another bill.
omnibus bill
Yeah.
at the end of the session called a budget implementer. And it's difficult to be able to affect and change what's in the budget implementer because sometimes there are thousands of pages, and to pull out one section, if they don't want to do it by an amendment, it ends up having to be completely rewritten. And these are in the final days of session.
And you're
So you
scrambling.
don't always have that opportunity, particularly now. Even though COVID, people are used to dealing with it, and most buildings are open, the state capitol is still limited in terms of the public access. So the third floor of the state senate was not available last session. There's still limited opportunity in the legislative office building. And so it does make it harder to kind of grab people on the go when you need to talk to them about something.
Sure, sure. And obviously, a lot of the bills. I mean, you represent the water industry, but I think you also represent cost, also, right?
Yes, I also represent the Connecticut Council of Small Towns, and that is an organization that represents smaller communities and is positioned to provide them with a strong voice at the state capitol. A lot of times our issues are similar. We may have issues, for example, the availability of water and wastewater operators is something that our legislative planning committee at cost has raised as an issue because some of our towns are seeing that as a concern as well.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we have similar interests, and so it is important to just keep those lines of communication open, making sure that we understand kind of how bills affect not only the water industry but also the municipal side.
Sure. Yeah. Now, obviously during the session, you're running pretty much nonstop as far as that goes. So, during off of session, okay, you get time to relax a little bit. So, tell me. I know you like to travel, so tell me a little bit about your personal travel here.
Well, we do like to travel. We just recently came back from Portugal and the Azores.
Yeah.
And it's funny, after you work with the water industry for a long time, you kind of always keep your eye open for the ways that they handle their water distribution. And it is interesting. So we should always remind ourselves when we're traveling how fortunate we are to have good, high-quality water, because it's not always the case.
Yeah.
In fact, we had a lot of waiters and waitresses in restaurants say, I wouldn't drink the water here. So,
Yeah.
okay, I'm not sure why, but we didn't.
Okay.
So we do like to travel. We hope to do a little bit more of that. Fortunately, with the legislative session ending typically in either May or June, that does afford us some opportunity to travel.
Yeah.
But there's always something that's happening, whether it's a special session like they recently had, or whether there are state agency regulations. So that's kind of the other side of it. Okay. A lot of times once the legislature adopts legislation, it directs a state agency to develop regulations to implement that legislation. And so you have to make sure that you work with the agency, that you comment on the proposed regulations to make sure that it doesn't create any other unintended consequences.
Wow. Okay. So going back to your travel, what's your most memorable travel excursion?
My most memorable, we in 2018, we went to Austria, my husband and I and my son and his girlfriend, and we decided to go to this little town called Meerhofen. And in Meerhofen, there is an annual event called the Almabetrieb, and I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, where they call the cows down from the mountains into the town.
Okay.
And so every half an hour, there are dozens and dozens of cows. They all have floral headdresses on, and they come marching down through the town, and people ring, of course, cowbells, and it just goes on all day.
Really?
And so that was probably one of the most unusual things that I have seen in my travels. It was a very local festival, but we were able to be part of it. And then, of course, enjoyed some nice chocolate cake afterwards. They're very big on having cakes and sweets and coffees at 3 o'clock, which I think we should embrace everywhere.
Sure. Why not? A tea and, afternoon tea and then maybe a nap to go along with it. So, out of all your travels, okay, what would be your most exotic food that you were able to partake of?
Well, I'm not the one that tries the exotic food as much as my husband and my son. They definitely are much better about that. But I know in Portugal, roasted sardines, we did try those. Oh, we tried limpets, those little shells you find at the beach,
Okay.
and they put garlic and salt on them and olive oil, and we tried those. I did not care for that. And also octopus, so grilled
okay.
octopus.
Okay. One of the questions I know, if you were stuck on a desert island, what food could you eat every day?
Probably fish. I do enjoy fish, so
Okay.
that would be good. I'd be lucky.
Okay.
My husband, however, would be looking for an Italian restaurant somewhere. So
Nice. Nice. Okay. Obviously, you know my music background. So, what's your favorite genre of music? Do you have any favorite groups?
well, I always liked the B-52s
Ooh.
and the Go-Go's.
Yeah. All right.
That was always fun. I also liked, even though it was a little after or before my time, generally the 60s, I think, were a lot of fun. And Fleetwood Mac, we
Okay.
just lost
Yeah,
Christy.
we just lost Christine McVie.
And
Got big
so
loss.
that was sad. We have seen them in concert over the years. So I kind of keep my mind open about different genres of music. When we were in Portugal, we actually listened to Fado, or Fada, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is a very soulful, kind of sad melodies that talk a lot about broken hearts and things like that. So I didn't necessarily care for that, but it was interesting to hear.
And that's it's kind of like country music. You lost your dog, you lost your wife, you lost your pickup truck or something like
Right,
that. They
right.
go from there.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. You mentioned concerts. Do you have a favorite concert that you experienced? In your maybe through your college days into your.
Yes, I do. I remember going to see Stevie Ray Vaughan. I
Ooh,
enjoyed
yes.
that. And I'm trying to think. I did go to a number of concerts. I did, however, have a really bad experience at the most recent concert I went to, which was the Elton John concert.
The latest one?
Yes.
Oh.
I had somehow I developed some kind of issue, and I had to leave abruptly because I just wasn't feeling well.
Uh-oh.
And this was after spending a fortune on tickets.
Oh,
and
my
having
God.
Fifth row center seats.
Oh.
And having to leave.
Oh,
And,
my God.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the people we were with that were sitting behind us, they had turned off their cell phone. So my poor husband had to drive me all the way back to Durham from Hartford and then turn around and go back and pick them up.
Oh, my God. Oh, my gosh.
So
Okay. That was a horror story. Oh, my God. Yeah, you mentioned Stevie Ray Vaughan. I was able to, obviously play, and I used to play quite a bit up at the casino up at Hampton Beach. Okay, and we actually opened for Stevie Ray's brother. Okay, Jimmy, and Stevie was in attendance, and he came up and sat in. It was wow. That was an experience, but.
And Bob Seger, I said that was one of the best concerts I had seen in my college days. It was definitely good.
Okay. Well, look, hey, wrapping up, I appreciate you coming down. Wrapping up, what advice would you give to a high school senior, somebody in college that's looking to forge their careers? What would you give them as your words of wisdom?
Well, I would suggest that they, first of all, keep their minds open. I also ask people to think about what kind of environment do they want to work in. Are they comfortable working in an office? Are they comfortable working in a cubicle, or would they prefer to be outside? Do they prefer to work with their hands? Because I think you want to be happy where you're working,
Mm-hmm.
and it's there are a lot of careers that if you're interested in going out and meeting people, traveling, you should find that out now.
Yes.
In interviewing interns at the state capitol, we always ask people, did they think that they would be comfortable going up and talking to people that they really didn't know? And we actually had some people say, you know what, I'm not comfortable doing that. I don't feel like I can go up to somebody that I don't know and introduce myself and talk to them. I'd rather send them a letter. And I said, this was years ago before email, and I kind of shook my head saying, then this is probably not the career for you. You really have to be someone that is outgoing. So think about kind of your traits and then figure out, and your interests, and figure out how they kind of match up in the work world. There's a whole range of occupations out there that you probably haven't thought about.
Correct.
That you hadn't heard about.
Yep.
And so trying to explore those. There are some career resource guides available. I know in my day there were. I'm assuming they're available now.
Yep.
And talk to people, meet people, ask them, what do they like about their job? What do they hate about it?
Yeah.
And what kind of skills do you need to be successful in it?
Sure.
I think the opportunities are wide open right now for young
Absolutely.
people. They can kind of write their own ticket as far as what they want to do. And I would also recommend volunteering or interning wherever you can.
Yep.
And trying to kind of try it out without having to commit to a full-time position. Just see what you like.
Well, and going forward, when you're going to college and so forth, if you don't have a decent idea, you don't want to get yourself into, thousands and thousands of dollars of college loans that, getting into a career that 2 years into it say, I don't want to do this anymore, so
well, that's absolutely correct. If you don't have a clear idea, I would suggest they try the community colleges,
Sure.
which are now providing people with, I believe, free tuition,
Yeah.
which is a great way to explore different avenues that you might want to pursue growth in. And now, because the community colleges are recognized by the four-year institutions,
Yep.
they can transfer those credits to the four-year institution and graduate literally half the cost
Yes,
that others have to pay. So,
exactly. And once you have a direction, then you can kind of, declare a major and then, beat a path that to a university or a college that, focuses on that type of curriculum and go from there. And like you say, at half the cost. So anyway.
and I would also say, don't forget the hobbies. We actually, when I was at CBIA involved in workforce development, we did a program where we were trying to identify career paths that individuals took. And it was interesting that when we talked to a lot of the different people, particularly in the science areas, engineering, a lot of them did have musical backgrounds, and they still played and they still enjoyed it, and they felt that creative outlet really helped them pursue more scientific careers. It's
Sure.
just the way that they were thinking and approaching issues. So I think it's, if you have hobbies, make sure that you incorporate those into your lifestyle.
Absolutely.
And don't be all work, no play.
Well, absolutely. And, one of the things that I stress to all my students, is do not underestimate the power of networking, because you never know, don't be afraid to go up and shake somebody's hand, introduce yourself, because you never know, when you may cross paths or when they're looking for something or you need something and so forth. They say, hey, I know a person, and so forth. That's so, so important.
Well, I got my first job at CBIA lobbying when my dad, who was not political at all, happened to be playing golf with the Speaker of the House at the time, Rich Balducci. And he said, oh, my daughter's interviewing at CBIA. And Rich Balducci said, well, I'll give them a call. And sure enough, he did. He hadn't met me, but just said, sounded like a good fit. And there
you go.
There you go.
And the rest is history. So, all right. Fantastic. Betsy, thank you so much for coming down, and I appreciate it. I think it gave us an insight, again, on a different complexion of the water industry and a career that's under that big umbrella. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the episode with Miss Betsy Gara, who is in the house, who is the Executive Director of the Connecticut Water Works Association, a.k.a. CWWA, and the careers you didn't know about. I'm your host, Dave Kosminski, and stay tuned. And if you're like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.